Sometimes something happens in our lives that is so abrupt and intense and unexpected. You know, from one split second to the next, your life is never going to be the same. I believe probably some of you in this group have had that kind of experience. That kind of moment came for me on October 7th, 2014. And that is the day that I now say ego finally caught up to and destroyed me. On that day, I got a call informing me that a reporter had uncovered some dirt from my past. He had discovered that I had been involved in a green card marriage for money, and during that same little period of time had been peripherally and very temporarily involved in a planned and aborted marijuana growing operation. Now, that call wouldn't have been so death-defyingly terrifying if it hadn't been that at the time it came in, I was the long-term partner and fiance to the governor of Oregon who was running for re-election. I was at that point serving as First Lady of Oregon. And I had made the terrible mistake of getting into a high-profile public position without being totally transparent about my past. When the news story dropped, the media went wild. And it wasn't just here in the Pacific Northwest. It was all across the country. CNN, Fox, all of it. I even wound up in the inglorious pages of UK tabloids. Overnight, I became clickbait, which was a term I hadn't even known prior to this experience, but then I was clickbait. And I became the most humiliated person in every circle that I was running in. My mistake shredded the life of the person that I love most in this world. It caused tremendous damage to state government. It destroyed my business. Was very hard on our family. Political opponents used the misdeeds from my past to launch a series of false allegations that the governor and I had misused our public positions for personal gain. And that led to a prolonged series of FBI and IRS investigations. The enormity of this is hard for me to convey. It was surreal. It just seemed so much bigger than I was. And when I finally got my mind around the fact that it wasn't just going to be weeks or months, it was going to be years before everything was going to wrap up and I would be able to get my work going again, it literally buckled my knees. I was forced to really face, who was I? Who was I if I wasn't a successful social activist or a businesswoman or even somebody that people liked? In my lowest moments, I would start to question, maybe this is really true. Maybe the ugly caricature that's being put forward in the media, maybe that is actually who I am. And when my mind would start down that path, I would literally physically flinch. It was a very stressful time. I wouldn't have admitted it then. I wasn't aware enough then to really have understood. But up until that point in my life, I had been so identifying as a human-only being. Even though I had a spiritual life, to be honest, I'd been skipping along the surface. I had been so unsure of my own worth and value that I really relied upon external validation to feel worthy. I sought that out, and I'd been pretty successful my whole life in getting that kind of validation. And suddenly, everywhere I looked, in the most spectacular and public form, I was being invalidated. And it wasn't just the awful headlines, it was the career that had seemed so 100% central to who I really was, gone. 90% of the people I had considered friends and colleagues gone. My 10-year beautiful, loving relationship was fractured. And I was pretty rudderless. We talked about the word surrender came up earlier. And this was the first time in my life that I actually was forced to surrender. I could not force my way through it. And I will tell you, tied back to the title of this talk, the fear at that point in my life was so intense. It was like a living entity, like a beast. You know that feeling when you're having a terrible dream and you wake up and you're like, oh, thank God it was just a nightmare? I can't recall how many times during this period of my life I would wake up and I would start to recall everything that was going on. And it really was like waking into a nightmare. There was so much uncertainty. It was so intense at times that my sweat smelled different. I smelled ranker than normal. That is how intense it was. Early on in the ordeal, I was at a really super low place, and I had a stretch of what I now call my dirty bathrobe on the couch days. Those were the days where I would roll out of bed after a crappy night's sleep, hit the couch, the remote control, and start drinking beer in the afternoon and just numb. And I had a couple of those, and during all of this, bear in mind, I live in a this is the house I'm in right now. It's a 960 square foot. I love my little home, but it's small, and I had reporters and photographers lurking around it like crazy. I had to keep the doors locked, the shades drawn. At times, I would see them come right up to the front window, which is where my couch and me and my dirty bathrobe were, like right down. I could see them right outside the shade. I felt hunted, to be honest. And I was beyond the even description of the word exhausted. Thank God I have a dog. They don't let you stay in your dirty bathrobe very long. And thank God I also know myself, and I knew that I wouldn't. So on day 3 or 4 of that, I knew I had to break out of that clearly unhealthy behavior. And I was up really early, way earlier than I normally do. And I resisted the remote control and I rolled out into my little hot tub on my deck here in Bend. And it was super, super cold. It was like single digit Central Oregon winter cold. And I was just shell shocked. And I think that my mind actually just reached the point where it couldn't race anymore. And I became more absolutely aware of the present moment than I ever had before in my life. My mind was not racing and worrying about the future. It wasn't ruminating and remembering and regretting and analyzing the past. It was just right here. Now, I had probably been out in that little hot tub on cold mornings hundreds of times when the steam is billowing up off the hot water. I'd never really seen it before. I had never really seen the steam or the light filtering through it. I became aware of layers of sound and the silence beneath them. I could see every single ice crystal on the pine needles. And in that experience, I lost track of my old sense of identity, and I lost track of even my sense of physical boundary between me and everything else. It was a sense of expansiveness. And in that instant, I disconnected my inner state of being from all the crap that was swirling in the actual events of my life. Now, I hadn't known that that was possible, but I did know I wanted more of it. I didn't have, at the time, I didn't have the awareness or the actual language for it. But what I believe now is that was my first really conscious experience of I am consciousness. capital I, capital A. I believe it was the first time that I consciously, at least as an adult, really met my spiritual self, the me with a capital S, or the self with a capital S. I guess the me with a capital M and the self with a capital S. And I've been on a deep dive into this crafty thing called ego ever since. Over time, I came to see that my whole life up until that point, I had been fighting like crazy to keep myself safe in a house made of glass. And that house was this carefully crafted personality. It was my accomplishments and accolades and my doings. It is the aspect that is often called ego. And I'm sure with this crowd right here, many of you have insight into this beyond what I do, but I'm sharing this experience because I think as New Thought practitioners, this is fundamental for us. And I'm not talking ego in just the psychological, the pop psychology sense or the Freudian sense. I'm talking about ego more from the angle of it being a construct that we create, a set of stories that we tell about ourselves and about our world. Before all of this happened, I would have thought that ego was the thing that helped us feel bigger and puffed us up and made us feel bigger and badder and stronger. What I've learned is it's exactly the opposite. Ego is that part of us, that piece of us we choose to believe about ourselves that tells us we're not good enough, and that does keep us in fear. It's the thing, for instance, that after, I'm sure some of you can relate to this, after you've just had this amazing day of knocking it out of the ballpark at work or as a mom or a dad, you lay in bed that night trying to go to sleep, and the only thing you're ruminating on is the one thing that didn't get done or the one mistake we made, right? It's so human, and it's the human only, the ego part of us that is tremendously limiting. I was shocked when I began to really be able to see how much ego attachment had cost me and limited me over the years. I could not believe how bound I had been by chains that I did not even know I was wearing, and they were chains that I had unwittingly created. That's the level of ego that I'm speaking about here. Now, one of my many gifts wrapped in barbed wire, which is how I talk about this experience a lot, was that I started working with A Course in Miracles. I'm sure many people in this group have experience with that. I had a really hard time with it at first. I will tell you, that's a whole different talk for a whole different time. But I had a hard time with the Christian terminology. I had a hard time with the masculine frame that it's put in, which I'm working on in a whole different project. But I was at such a broken down, broken open place in my life. I could sense the power of it. And A Course in Miracles describes ego as, quote, a thing of madness. It's an illusory dream of what we really are. It is our sense of self as human only, our sense of self as separate, our sense of self with that little s. And ego thrives on and feeds fear. I mentioned a moment ago that the fear I experienced in the first many months into a couple of years of this experience was indescribably intense. It would be, first thing in the morning when you wake up, last thing you're ruminating on, what was the latest news story going to say? Would there be another death or rape threat? What was going to happen with my work? How on earth were we going to survive it financially? Was the person I love most in the world going to leave me? Was he going to be able to survive it and recover? And guess what? None of that happened. None of that bad stuff came to pass. Yes, it was horrific. Yes, it took over 6 years to get past the financial and the legal challenges and all of that. But as I expected all along, a couple of years into it, the federal investigators came back and said there's nothing here to file charges over and dropped the case. There was still all kinds of cleanup, that the damage was done, so to speak, but none of that happened. My career in environmentalism and new economy, it was changed for sure, but part of that's because I was changed. It wasn't destroyed. And now I have this whole second career. David can probably laugh at that. I don't know where it's going with this ministerial thing, but I do know I never would have been on this pathway had I not had this big comeuppance with ego. And I think in some ways I was kind of like the Darth Vader of ego. It's like I had all of this power, but hadn't really done the work to know what to do with it without causing some problems. So, and I will also share, my beloved John and I are still together after all of this. And I love to say, I could have said before all of it happened that he and I had been together 10 years and we had never said an intentionally unkind or hurtful thing to one another. I can still say that after all of this. We've changed, it's been rough, but here we are. Our whole family is in better shape than we were, in some small part because of what we all had to go through to navigate this. I'm not saying it wasn't challenging at all, but I am saying this far on the other side, I can really, really see and speak to the gift that truly facing ego identification is. I will also say that to this day, not one person has been ugly to my face. Every nasty comment has been anonymous or behind the shield of a computer screen or a media outlet. So what I really want to share with you all today, I feel like my life in general, but certainly this experience in some ways has given me a little bit of a superpower into fear management. And that's some practical tips and tools are what I really want to share with that. I had to learn fear management during this time to psychologically survive. And it has benefited my life in every single aspect, getting this. What I learned is that I had spent so much of my life up to that point in fear of some dreaded future outcome. And none of them really ever happened. All of the big stuff that has happened to me, the tough stuff with my family, the blown knee, the public shaming, the teenager getting into a head-on who's fine, by the way, all that stuff though, that just came out of the blue. None of that was stuff that I had feared. The one fear that I did have that did come to pass was a subconscious fear. And that was the one of being rejected, disliked. Well, boy, howdy, that happened in spades in a big way. And yes, it was hell. And yes, it was awful. Here I am. I'm still standing. And in fact, I am happier, more joyful, more genuinely alive than had it not happened. The truth is, I'm finding that other than, fear is necessary. We have fear for a reason. It's an evolutionary tool that helps us do things like survive in a war zone or be like, oh crap, there's a rattlesnake and get out of the way, right? But most of us, if we're comfortable enough to be in this session right now, we're not in that kind of fear. If we are in fear, we're more in fear about some potential future happening. Mark Twain said, I am an old man and I've known many troubles, but most of them never happened. Right? So I'm asking you as we move into the tail end of our talk here, just to check in a little bit and to consider what are the fears that may be eroding your peace right now? Goodness forbid, keeping you up at night. What are the fears? What are they stopping you from doing? And are they really necessary? Now, the key is, how do you actually learn how to identify whether fear is necessary or not and act on it? Well, you could orchestrate a massive, catastrophic public shaming. I'm here to tell you it can work. It's a little extreme, and I would not advise it, because there are such gentler ways, such saner ways to take back the reins from fear's littleness, or from ego's littleness and fear. The first step that was instrumental for me was just becoming better able to notice it. I don't know about you all, but for me, when I have been in really intense situations, this last one included for sure, the fear has been so ever present that it's been like air. It's almost been like you just don't notice it. You're just moving through it all the time. It's the backdrop. Becoming better able to actually take a step back and check in with and allow the discomfort of saying, yes, I'm feeling fear, is instrumental, because that's when we can grab hold of it and decide what we want to do with it. Noticing when I'm worrying about something that may happen in the future, or noticing that little stab of I'm not good enough or I may fail at. I feel like when I started becoming better able to do that, I actually started using ego as a teacher. When it's showing me where I'm still practicing habits of not enoughness. And in this culture, we are awash in messages of not enoughness and of fear. So really being better able to recognize that was instrumental. That level of fear is what destroys our peace. It's also what leads to war and what is destroying our planet, and then telling us that we don't have any power to do anything about that, which is egoic malarkey. Just to be blunt. I would be more blunt, but I want to keep it a little clean here. The next great technique that has been instrumental for me, again, it harkens back to A Course in Miracles. One of the things I so love about A Course in Miracles is that it is like mind-blowingly profound, right? It turns your beliefs upside down. It makes you question assumptions, but it's also like so real world, day-to-day practical. And one of the wonderful practical tools that I learned through A Course in Miracles is just choose again. Choose again. You catch yourself getting wrapped around your axle. Oh, how am I going to pay that bill in 2 weeks? Choose again. I'm angry at so-and-so. Choose again. I'm feeling, choose again, choose again. I probably, in the first part of my experience, I might have had to say choose again to myself 500 times a day, but it gave me something to do. But eventually, it actually shifts the thinking. And the more you work with it, I am finding, the more quickly you can actually be like, oh yeah, I'm going to choose again. I'm not going to sacrifice my peace or my power with that thought. So choose again is super, super powerful. I know in this crowd, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but meditation, I will just say, I think that the fact that I had a multi-year meditation, pretty regular meditation practice on board before everything blew up for me is one of the handful of things that literally may have saved my life. It was the only way that I could rein in my racing, crazy, out of control mind. And I do think it's fairly common human behavior that when we're in times of things blowing up, when we're in times of intense intense life circumstances. I mean, this human part of our journey is not for wimps, right? When we're in one of those times, meditation can be the first thing that falls off the table or falls off the plate. It's not for me anymore. And I just really, really, really encourage it. And even when we're in those really intense times, especially when we're in those really intense times. And one aspect of meditation, and this is the single most powerful tool I have learned for really being able to manage acute fear, is the art of coming into the present moment. A little bit like I tried to do in our meditation, but we have a stab of fear. We have a rush of, oh my God, how am I going to pay for that? Oh my God, what's he going to do? 95% of the time, though, when we can just take one quick step back, most of the time we're actually safe in that specific physical moment. And the beauty of being able to take that breath is that we can actually get a little bit more of a rational understanding. Is this a fear that I have any control over or not? And if it's not, why waste time on it? If it does merit action, then I then know that I have to put a plan of action around that particular fear. So coming into the present moment is and training ourselves to do that, especially when we're stressed, especially when we're not feeling necessarily balanced and grounded, is one of the most powerful experience or powerful exercises that I could recommend. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are not just these bodies. When we are at a level of fear around non-life-threatening, just human day-to-day experiences, relationships, finance, whatever, when we're at a level of fear around those, we're identifying as human only. We're in our small selves. We're believing that we have to handle this situation all by ourselves. We're forgetting that we are one with Creator, with God, with Source. We have that power to wield in any circumstance that we are dealing with. That's been one of the most powerful recent breakthroughs for me, is just understanding when I'm in that level of fear, I'm forgetting what I really am. One of Unity's 12 powers is the power of release, the power of letting go of that which no longer serves us. Now, we have been through quite an 18 months together as a collective, right? I mean, we are human beings, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, but we're having it right now in a really wild time on this planet. We've had a global pandemic that just shifted everything. We also have the combined crises of whether it's climate or other environmental degradation or, violent conflicts, racial comeuppances that we're dealing with in this country. It is a time of layered crises, and we're all alive right now at this time. And we on this session, in this gathering, we're all people who know that we're spiritual beings all alive right now at this time together. I think more than any other time, I've heard the term apocalyptic applied to what we're going through and what we're feeling. And I've always said that I sort of take a little comfort in the fact that some of my greatest forms of guilty pleasure are post-apocalyptic fiction, but I won't go there. What I do want to share with you all, because apocalyptic's a scary word, right? But when you go back to the root of the word apocalypse, It actually means to uncover, or lay bare. It's Greek, to uncover, lay bare, or disclose. We're all here alive together right now at a time when we have a chance to really see through the veil, to see through what is it that we want to bring with us, what is it that we want to keep, what is it that we want to release in ourselves and in our society. We're at a unique and powerful time together. And I believe the work that we do in gatherings like this and in our New Thought movement has never been more important ever before on this planet than in this time. There is absolutely nothing to lose by losing ego identification. That provides us an unbelievable opportunity right now to evolve past ego domination, which has been so in your face visible in these last several years on this planet. We have the chance now to evolve, to seize an apocalypse, to seize an unveiling, and move past that at the personal and the collective levels. Now, I started this talk by saying that ego had destroyed me. It's not actually true. The unawareness of the damage that ego identification can do is what really destroyed me. And it actually didn't destroy the me that's real. It destroyed a construct. It destroyed a certain path that I was on. And yeah, it hurt. I'm not going to say it did not, but I will say it was so worth it, y'all. It was so worth it. And I'm not just sugarcoating. And I'm also not, by any means, this is always so important, I'm also not saying I have this ego thing sorted out. Oh, no. But I have made really big strides, and I am just so much happier and more peaceful and more able to be peaceful no matter what is swirling through my life than I had before all of this went down. That I am grateful for. My life is immeasurably richer and more magical, and I know so many of you on this call get that. You know, understand that when we sort of have to, something forces us to wake up to ourselves as spiritual selves, the beautiful outcomes that can come from that. That's what I want to offer here. I had no idea how great it felt to have such a more wide open heart until I actually experienced it. I couldn't really imagine it. And you can't even actually describe it. These are some of the things that, as all wisdom teachings say, language is kind of insufficient to convey, but I see some nodding heads, so I know there's a sense to it. I used to think that my carefully crafted, shiny exterior and that story was protecting me, and it was actually robbing me. It was robbing me from all of this other richness. Eckhart Tolle has said that, I might paraphrase him a little bit, but he said that identifying with ego is a monstrous act of reductionism. That's certainly what I have found. In this human part of our existence, we actually have a chance to live two lives. There's the one that we live getting up to that point where we finally deeply question, by choice or by force, who we really are. And then there is the beautiful one spent after that, opening and expanding from there. And we get to choose. How cool is that? So I'll close by saying, here is to each of us moving more and more fully into our true selves, healing our minds and therefore our world. Choose again. Remember who and what you are. And let's bring about the more beautiful world we know is possible. Namaste. Peace out. And so it is.
You call me out upon the water, the great unknown, where feet may fail, and there I find you in mystery, in oceans steep. My faith will stand, and I will call upon your name, and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, and you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the water wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my spirit. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the water wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my spirit. And keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, and you are mine.
We come now, we bring our attention into this present moment, the holy instant of now, which is where all of life is lived. You can close your eyes if you're comfortable, feet on the floor. Bring in some deep cleansing breath. Feel the energy from the core of this planet moving up through the layers of rock and water and soil and earth, through whatever foundation of a building you may be in. Feel that tingling, feel that unbreakable connection to this planet that is our home. Feel that energy moving up through ankles, bringing relaxation as it does. Up into legs and knees and upper legs, up into hub and torso. Just feel that energy moving up through our spine, up into the upper back. Let the shoulders drop. Feel the energy, beautiful light energy coursing down our arms through our fingers, our chest and collarbone, neck. Any tension that may be being carried in the jaw and the scalp, just feel that drop. as we focus on right now, this holy instant, we allow our sense of boundary to dissolve, our sense of separation from all it is. Feeling that earth energy, that cosmic oneness of which we are part. We feel a sense of expansiveness. Our oneness with Source, Creator, with the web of life at all levels. We smile in these bodies, knowing that we are much more than these bodies. And for about a minute, I invite us to just be silent outside of normal boundaries, wholly, wholly aware of our oneness. Bring our attention back to the sacred space we've created with this service, with this coming together even across geographic distance. That deep inner change. We affirm this and we know that this is already so in the mind of God, and so it is.